Give your attention to Councilwoman Schwartz for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to introduce to you Pastor Carl Frazier. He's been with the Southwest Baptist Church at Eveningside and 29th for 3 years. He's married to Lanessa Frazier, and they have 3 children and 2 grandchildren.
Amen. Let us pray. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to be here at this place this evening. Please bless the mayor, the city manager, city council members, and other city employees and their families. Lord, we realize they have a great responsibility to manage this great city of Topeka. Great responsibility to ensure equal services to all Topekans. Great responsibility to ensure peace and justice is equal to all Topekans. A great responsibility to ensure that job opportunities are given to all people, no matter what side of the town they live in. Equal opportunities and benefits such as health care, equal promotions, opportunities to all ages, especially the youth. Many youth are going to be looking for jobs this summer, for opportunity for financial resources, but yet with the opportunity to be there. Lord, I just ask to bless this council, Lord, to find opportunities for all people. Lord, I pray that as Jesus saw the multitudes in Matthew chapter 5, he sat down with his disciples, and the mayor, city manager, and the city council can see the condition in the same crowd in Topeka. People who are poor, who are unable to stand another increase in utility bills. People who are poor, who are tired of unresolved murders and crime and limited resources. Jesus saw these people that was poor in spirit, those who moaned, those who meek, those who was hungry, those who was thirsty, those who was merciful, those that was poor in heart. And he saw the peacemakers. He saw all of these, and he sat down with his disciples. I hope today that the people of Topeka can sit down and look at the people who are sitting at the table. Until we sit down together at the table, freedom will reign in all neighborhoods in Topeka, such as Highland Park, North Topeka, City Center, Belmont, Matthew Park, Oakland, Southwest, Southeast, even Burnett Mount. Lord, I pray that you would cover this great city of Topeka with the blood of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Frazier. We'll have the proclamations. We have 3 proclamations tonight. The first one has to do with small business, and I'm going to ask Glenda Washington, who's the Vice President for Entrepreneurial and Minority Business Development, to come up and join me. And actually, we have a number of people in the 3, 4, 5 front rows, all pertaining to the proclamations this evening. So we're glad to have you here. And this proclamation, it states, whereas the U.S. Business Administration defines a small business as an enterprise having fewer than 500 employees, and whereas small businesses make up 99.7% of U.S. employer firms and account for 63%, or 14.3 million of the 22.9 million net new jobs created between 1993 and mid-2013, and whereas the state of Kansas is home to more than 160,000 small business entities, and whereas a week is set aside each year to celebrate small businesses for their contributions to the local economy in the form of starting, growing, and expanding small businesses, operating nonprofits, and operating new jobs. Now therefore I, Larry Wolgast, Mayor of the City of Topeka, do hereby declare and proclaim May 12 through May 16, 2014 as Small Business Week, and call upon all the citizens of Topeka to support small business and celebrate the contributions they have made to our local economy. I know you have a special event coming up, and I want you to introduce these people that are here.
We're excited to have a group of entrepreneurs here that are going to be in our finalists for the Small Business Awards next week. So I'd like to invite you out. Oh, we're sold out. I cannot invite you out. I'd like for you to be there in spirit. I'd like to introduce, though, our guests that we have here this evening. Will the representative from ICI Manufacturing stand, please? Creative Business Solutions. Creative Business Solutions. Thank you. Topeka Paradonics. Easter Seals. There you go. For All Humanity. Is she here? There she is. Meridian Roofing. Tobias Designs. McCray Plaza. Key Staffing. Let's give them a hand, please. And Mr. Mayor, we also have three members of the EMBD Council here, as well as the Small Business Development Center rep. Would you please stand? Thank you.
And these people are the finalists for the awards to be presented next week. So again, congratulations for being at that level, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The second proclamation deals with the National Historic Preservation Month, and I invite up Zach Sneathen, President of the Landmarks Commission. This is something that we do every year, and I know it is in May, that we recognize historic preservation and all the efforts on that behalf. So we have a proclamation. Whereas historic preservation is a proven and effective tool for managing responsible growth, economic development, revitalizing neighborhoods and downtown commercial areas, fostering local pride, and maintaining and embracing community character. And whereas historic preservation is a prime endeavor for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds, and whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history and cultural heritage in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of our heritage that has shaped us as a people, and whereas new age of preservation, embark, inspire, engage, is a theme for National Historic Preservation Month 2014, co-sponsored by the Topeka Landmarks Commission and the National Historic National Trust for Historic Preservation. And now therefore I, Larry Wolgast, Mayor of the City of Topeka, do proclaim the month of May as National Historic Preservation Month, and call upon the people of Topeka to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. And are there's some members of the commission?
Leon Graves is back there, and Nelda Gato, and Paul Post is there. I think that's it. that I
Thank
see
you
out
very
there.
much for coming. We appreciate it. Now, and actually, Council, we have a third proclamation, an important one, and that pertains to the area of public service. And in this case, and as some of you remember, we do this each year, we have some city employees that work in the area of public service, that representing all public employees and the public service sector here this evening. And this is Mary Shaw of the Topeka Police Department and Warren Woodruff, Housing Supervisor for Housing and Neighborhood Development. Thank you for joining us. Whereas Topeka is served every day by public servants as at the federal, state, county, and city levels, and whereas many public servants, including police officers and firefighters, risk their lives each day to provide effective and efficient services to the citizens of Topeka, and whereas public servants, including, and here we'll name the different areas of the city: building and maintenance, street and transportation traffic, fleet services, planning and zoning, technology, water services, water pollution control, zoo, administration, financial services, park forestry, code enforcement and housing, and a neighborhood development, and countless others who provide diverse services throughout our city. Whereas the continuity of service delivery would be impossible without the hard work, collaboration, and dedication of these public servants at every level in our city. Therefore, I, Larry Wolgast, Mayor of the city, do hereby proclaim May 5th through May 10th as Public Service Recognition Week in the city of Topeka, and thank all public service employees for their work. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is presentations. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, I would like to invite Monique Laudet, who is the neighborhood liaison, resident liaison for the city, and she's going to provide information on the community action team.
Greetings, Mayor, City Council, and City Manager. January 2014 marks the inception of the Community Action Team. The Community Action Team, otherwise known as the CAT Team, was created to improve interdepartmental communication with the common goal of bringing resolution to constituent, neighborhood, and business concerns and issues that impede upon the quality of the City of Topeka constituents. This task could not be achieved without the collaboration of our community partners who bring specialized services to the table. The team meets on a bi-weekly basis, and we are adding new members as specific areas of concern are discovered. Thus far, the committee has been tasked to bring resolution to a wide spectrum of issues and concerns, ranging from business zoning issues to life safety concerns. At this time, I'd like to ask for the Community Action Team members to come forward so I'd have the pleasure of introducing them. Friends going forward, okay.
Two rows.
We have April Maddox with the Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging, Becky Isapi with the City of Topeka Zone Planning, Captain Bill Cochran, City of Topeka Police Department, Chris Palmer with Cornerstone of Topeka, Corey Wright with the City of Topeka Housing and Neighborhood Development, Barry Feeker, Topeka Rescue Mission, Fran Hugg, City of Topeka Development Services, G.R. Laughlin with the Community Resources Council, Deputy Fire Chief Greg Moody, City of Topeka Fire Department, Jamie Slack with Safe Streets. We have Lieutenant Jana Harden with the Topeka Police Department, Jeff Karras with the Topeka Rescue Mission, Jim Green, City of Topeka Emergency Management, Dr. Joe Cook with the Pet Assistance Network, Lee Morris, Vallejo Behavioral Health Care, Luther Gagne, City of Topeka Chief of Prosecution, Lieutenant Michael Cross, City of Topeka Police Department, Fire Marshal Michael Martin, City of Topeka Fire Department, Miriam Berkey, City of Topeka Development Services, Patty Burkholder, City of Topeka Code Enforcement, Officer Sean Kimball, City of Topeka Crisis Intervention Division, Captain Steve Perney, City of Topeka Police Department, Teresa Dothard, Breakthrough House, and Teresa Homer, Shawnee County Health Agency. I have the pleasure of co-chairing the committee with Captain Darren Scott, the Assistant to the City Manager and Neighborhood Services Director. The City of Topeka would like to extend our gratitude at this time to our dedicated partners who devote their time and expertise to this effort. Thank you, and I stand for questions. Thank you. You may be seated.
questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for
The
the
pleasure's mine.
presentation. And that concludes the presentations. We will proceed then with the roll call.
Mayor Wolgass,
Here.
Council members Hiller. Here. Compost.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Everhart. Here. De La Isla.
Here.
Manspeaker.
Here.
Schwartz.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
And Harmon.
I don't believe there are any additions to the agenda. Then we will proceed with the consent agenda. If the clerk would read, please.
A is board appointment recommending the appointment of Mary Powell to the Topeka Sustainability Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term ending February 28, 2015. B is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Helen Crow to the Topeka Board of Zoning Appeals to fill an unexpired term ending November 30, 2015. C are minutes of the regular meeting of April 15, 2014, and there's a list of open after midnight applications, and staff is requesting your approval.
That is the consent agenda. It is the pleasure of the council. Ms. Elisla moves to approve. Mr. Schmidt seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, consent agenda is approved. And I would like to take a moment to introduce the new appointees. First is Mary Powell. If you would stand to serve on the Sustainability Board. Thank you for your service. And then Helen Crow, also appointed to fill an unexpired term on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Thank you very much, both of you, for your service. And we will proceed with business. First as council, you see the new format that we use. We have action items and then non-action items. And so we start with the action items. A charter ordinance.
A is a charter ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending City of Topeka Code Section A92 and repealing said original section concerning the Topeka Metropolitan Transit Authority.
This has been approved by the Senate and approved by the Policy and Finance Committee. So Councilman Manspeaker, if you'd like to report back from the committee.
Yeah, it came before the committee, I believe, last month, and it passed unanimously as they were requesting to stay at the same level.
Okay. Do you want to move the approval of
Would move the approval
of the
setting of the mill levy.
okay, this is a charter ordinance that sets a mill levy, and Ms. Delisla seconds. And actually, of interest, this is the first of the mill levies that we set for next year, and we do it this early because it is a charter ordinance, and their fiscal year is July 1. There's a 60-day protest period, so all of this moves us back until this early that we're actually setting a mill levy, and it's a charter ordinance, so it takes the 2/3 vote of the governing body. Is there any discussion? Ms. Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it stays the same in 2015, but it drops in 2016?
Yeah, in the charter ordinance, it's at 3 mills. So I don't know, a number of years in a row now, we have been making this change, putting it at the 4.2 mill levy. And so it's really the same as it's been for probably 3 years. Or 5 years, I'm not sure the number, but it's been a number of years, it's been at this level.
Okay, but what I'm saying is it's at 4.2 for 15, but 3 mills in 16,
Yes,
right?
right, unless we take this action again next year.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I would just hope at some point in time that we would consider that. I think Susan Duffy's doing an awesome job of thinking outside the box, and my daughter and grandson had a chance to go to Chicago, and they're paying the same fees as we are. And we are doing better than Wichita, and again, it goes back to that formula. So I would just like to see us do some things, and with Mars opening and other entities out there, I'd like to see us try to, at some point in time, get back the nights and weekend service that affects our ridership to get back and forth to work. I will go ahead and support this, but I think next year I will be really trying to look at that, and I would hope my colleagues would do the same, because I think our bus service is very crucial in Topeka. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those comments, and I know some of us also certainly share your feelings, and this is something that we can suggest that the TMTA look at for next year. Is there other discussion? If not, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
Having voted yes, the charter ordinance is approved. Item B, ordinance on historic landmarks.
B is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson concerning historic preservation, amending City of Topeka Code Sections 260-010 and 020, 18, 255, 020, 030, 040, 060, 070, 090, 110, 140, 160, and 170, and specifically repealing said original sections as well as repealing in their entirety sections 18, 255, 050, 080, 100, 120, and 130.
Thank you. And I failed to introduce the board chair, Rod Miller, of the Transportation Authority, who just left, and Susan Duffy. So I do want to acknowledge publicly that they were here and a part of the meeting. Okay, now we're down to the historic landmarks. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask Mr. Finder to step forward. What we're considering today is an approval to update the local historic landmark ordinance.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. A few weeks ago, we had this as a discussion item, and I went through a little bit more detail at that time. I'll just hit real quickly on some of the high points for you to take into consideration. Number one, this ordinance is a local landmarks ordinance strictly. It does not apply to state or national listed properties. So anything when we talk about, it's local landmarks and local districts only. We do local landmarks through a zoning process, and we approve that, and you approve that actually ultimately through the zoning process as an overlay district, and we have about 46 of these landmarks. This ordinance has been worked on, I think it started 3 years ago. The whole intent was to clarify and streamline the process and duties of the Landmarks Commission and the staff in support of that. It's gone through the Landmarks Commission, Planning Commission with quite a bit of discussion last year, with some input also from the state and local stakeholders. The biggest change you probably need to know about is one that adds the ability to do a local commercial district. We can only do local residential districts now as a historic district. So adding that ability to do commercial districts will help preserve our status, what we call a CLG status, our certified local government status from the state, where they give us the review authority for state projects, as well as opens it up for funding for historic preservation activities. So that's the big change. As I said, Planning Commission recommended approval. We do ask for a motion to approve the ordinance, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. And as I said, we had a presentation on this on April the 15th. Are there questions, comments from the council pertaining to the matter of the ordinance? Mr. Campos moves to approve the ordinance. Mrs. Ortiz seconds. Is there discussion? Mr. Schmidt?
I have a question for Mr. Finder. We changed what would be line 66 and 67 at least in the report that we got, concerning committees and subcommittees, so that they may be made up of people appointed by the chairperson and members outside of the Topeka Landmarks Commission. Can you tell me why we would appoint, why there would be subcommittees appointed of people outside of the Landmarks Commission?
This was in the original ordinance. We didn't change it other than to wordsmith it. We being staff don't really have either way. I don't think we've used the I don't think there's been any committees appointed by the chair. In fact, I know there hasn't been. There's been some just select two people work groups that help us from time to time on certain items. But in terms of using this, no, we haven't used this. And I honestly, I think it was just to add some flexibility to get some work items done, not knowing what those might include. And we had a limited Landmarks Commission. We may want to pull from outside the commission. But we haven't used it yet, but I don't really have a matter one way or the other on this.
So the purpose of that would be to bring in, say, an outside expert or somebody like that to serve on a relevant committee, if such a committee were created?
Yes, maybe, for example, we could get somebody from the state SHPO office, or somebody that has some experience in doing preservation work that's not on the commission, yes.
And they would have no policy-making or decision-making ability other than in that subcommittee, which would then have to be accepted by the committee of the whole?
Correct. They would recommend to the Landmarks Commission, and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion points, Mrs. Hiller?
Well, I want to again compliment you and the staff and the various commissions on all the work that's gone into this. This is a huge overhaul, and I said that last week and I wanted to say it again. We did get questions from a constituent today, and just to kind of summarize them, part of the process of upgrading this was to put the term local with landmarks and local with historic districts to make it clear what the commission governed, if you will, on our behalf. But you also do have a relationship that you mentioned as serving as the certified local government and doing reviews and some other procedures and advising on behalf of the state as well as the federal government, correct?
That is correct.
Do you think that this ordinance, as it's written, adequately reflects that role as well?
Yes, I do. The relationship is there's between the state and the local authority, which is the Landmarks Commission in this case, is governed by a separate document, an agreement between the state, the city, and actually National Park Service. And so we didn't want to confuse the issue. This ordinance really applies to local landmarks and districts. The Landmarks Commission duties are spelled out in here, and part of that is to, if we are recognized as a CLG by the state, that they will end up doing state and national reviews at the local level. But that is governed by a separate document, and I think that's worthy of not trying to, I think this ordinance doesn't try and mix the two and try to clarify their duties. So.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Mrs. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, I wasn't at the discussion of the last meeting that you brought this up. Will there be any local landmarks that'll be grandfathered in, or will they have any time to meet the requirements? Can you explain that a little bit?
Right. Obviously, this ordinance takes precedence. We already have 46 landmarks. If they were to make a change to their property, to the building, they fall under the process that you would adopt, or whatever the current code is. There's not so much, yes, so there's not so much a change to the standards, or there's no change to the standards. That is, we went to painstaking length to make sure that it's clear in here, there is one standard. If you're a local landmark and a potential national listing, we are defaulting to the Secretary of Interior standards. That is one standard, one review, and we'll make one conclusion. So the standards don't change. The process to get to a, for instance, a demolition, that may change. You would have to notify the neighborhood and surrounding property owners. Actually, demolitions would be approved by this body. That doesn't, so some of the process changes, standards do not. And so I wanted to make that clear. But yes, any existing landmark would have to comply.
So they would, in a sense, they're grandfathered in. They don't have to go through a new process or anything. Once they're in. This ordinance doesn't change their status. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're still going to be landmarks, and they're still going to be recognized. They don't have to go through anything.
Right.
And any changes to their property we clarified what the standards are to meet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you. That answered it.
Okay. Other questions? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the ordinance on historic landmarks is approved. Now we go to item C, and actually, council members, the next three are zoning issues, zoning ordinances, where we sit as the judicial body over from the approving or disapproving the action of the planning commission. So ordinance C is is a recommendation from the planning commission.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at the northeast intersection of Southwest Westport Road and Southwest 22nd Terrace, City of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas, from M3 Multiple Family Dwelling District to ONI 2 Office and Institutional District.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fyander will present on this item.
Thank you again. This first proposal is a rezoning on Southwest 22nd Terrace and Westport. It's a 5-acre vacant tract, and this was sort of a residual of the elimination of the E districts. This was a property that was zoned E, and they have a choice to go to M3 or ONI2. We automatically converted everything to M3, but they did want to go to office and institutional, so they initiated this at the Planning Commission. And so we recommend, Planning Commission staff are recommending approval of the ordinance.
And there was no opposition.
No, we did not have any
There was
comment.
no opposition to this.
Correct.
Okay, are there questions? Mr. Schmidt?
I just would like to know that Council Harmon appears to be stealing this out of my district, but it's noted as District 9. This is actually District 8.
Yeah.
Would be the proper district for it.
I was hoping you wouldn't catch that.
Well, I live on 22nd Park, which this runs right next to, so.
All right, got that taken care of. Other questions or comments? Your pleasure. Ms. Delisla? Ms. Delisla moves to approve. Mrs. Schwartz seconds. Discussion, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
Mr. Compost. We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the ordinance is approved. Item D, an ordinance, J.G. Myers Jr. Trust.
D is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at 3337 Northwest Lower Silver Lake Road and the west half of property at 3311 Northwest Lower Silver Lake Road from R1 Single Family Dwelling District with a special use permit for a vegetable market all to I1 Light Industrial District.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fyander will present and answer any questions on this item.
Thank you. This proposal is a rezoning from single family to light industrial, I-1, at the southwest corner of Lower Silver Lake Road in Furman. The property actually has the old produce stand on, as you heard, with special permit for. The property owner wants to use the property for storage, for agricultural equipment, and not use it for produce. And so this proposal would be on the edge of a industrial park as well as bounded by railroad tracks. Both staff and the Planning Commission have recommended approval, and we ask for a motion to approve.
Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Mr. Schmidt?
I noticed in the report that the NIA voted unanimously against approval of this, and in the staff report, it also, in the NIA's primary disagreement was the open storage of vehicles and the like, and in the staff report, it says that they would be okay with recommending a PUD instead of the I-1 zoning. Is there a reason, what's the reason for staff recommending I-1 over the PUD rezoning?
Well, that is an option that we presented at the Planning Commission. In order to do straight zoning, it was, I guess, believed that being an industrial, right next to railroad tracks, across street from industrial property, the storage itself is not impacting adjacent properties. So I think that was what, I think he actually owns the adjacent property as well that has a house on there. So I think the planning commission at the time did not think that was a necessary option. We would support, staff would support either option. I don't think there's, the site is so small that we don't believe it would be that great of an impact.
And I would say that it is a sliver between the highway, between the street and the railroad tracks. It's just a sliver of land that was a vegetable stand for a number of years. So I think I would support it going so that it can be a part of the development of the entire area. Are there other questions or comments? Mr. Schmidt?
I have a further question on that. In the photographs that I've seen of the area, and actually if you Google and go to the street view, there's open storage of farm vehicles and trucks there right now. Is that in violation of their current zoning?
Yes, this came through as a violation. So they're trying to mitigate what was a violation, what is a violation.
Okay. Is there other discussion? Mrs. Hiller?
Thank you. I was okay with this because I know it's just a sliver, but I appreciate Councilman Schmidt's questions because in the conversation, the owner wants to sell the house. And so once you change zoning, then it piggybacks on down the line often. And that area has been rural. It's been Silver Lake Road. It was truck farms and houses, and is very much when people come across the Westgate Bridge and they're going to our new soccer complex that we're investing millions of dollars in, or choosing to turn the other way to go to Noto or to stop at greenhouses and so on, that little spot is the gateway to that Silver Lake Road corridor. Obviously, the challenges that the owner had on that particular property, they have all the way down the street where there were the truck farms and so on. What is planning's vision of how that corridor will look in 10 years?
Well, this is right at the edge of this industrial area.
Right.
And that's our future plan for the area. West of Furman Road, we are looking at light industrial uses. You have the Chamber Business Park, Industrial Park there. You have Del Monte. You have a lot of those. You have the utilities in place. So this particular piece is right at that point of transitioning into, when you go east of Furman, it would be more of more rural agriculture, residential. So it is one of those situations where being used as a produce stand in the past, the character was not residential. And so in order to use it in a non-residential manner, this would be consistent with our comp plan and our future use for the area.
If I may, I mean, the look of the industrial park is fairly organized. I mean, it's upscale, if you will, not just vehicles out on the back. We've struggled with junkyards in North Topeka for a long time, which may be the sensitivity that the NIA has. This I-1 zoning would protect against that junkyard look, or it would not?
There are no standards to screen outside storage. And so I-1 would not screen from the street or from the adjacent property to the east.
And one last question then, a PUD could have some conditions that would require
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes, I'm going to, not right now, but I'm going to make a motion to amend this to a PUD zoning.
Excuse me, this is from the Planning Commission, so we have three choices. We either adopt it as it is, or we override their recommendation, or we have to refer it back to them. We have those three choices. We are really reviewing the recommendation of the planning commission here. So we only have by statute those three choices.
The planning commission in their report says that an alternate to straight I-1 zoning would be the PUD. So what would I have to do in order to accept the planning department's alternate recommendation?
I would suggest you recommend this back to the planning commission with a statement specifying the basis for the governing body's decision to approve or disapprove, and it takes a majority of 6 to do that.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, yes,
You
Mr. Sublette?
You can reject or amend by 2/3 vote.
That's
so it
right.
could be
That was
amended.
my first.
Sorry.
Number 1, we can accept it. Number 2, we can reject it. Or number 3, we can remend it back and tell them the reason we are remending it back.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think you heard. You can amend it by a 2/3 vote.
I'm sorry. I didn't know that we could change it here. We can amend it.
You
Okay.
can amend it by a 2/3 vote.
All right, thank you. Excuse me, I was wrong. I take that correction, and your amendment is in order.
That's right. I just want to ask a question before I word that amendment. So the difference between the PUD and the I-1 zoning would be that the PUD would require screening of any storage facilities, junkyard, that kind of stuff, from Lower Silver Lake Road, correct?
That is correct. Yes, that's the recommendation option in the staff report.
Okay.
I-
I would then move that we amend the,
That we approve it with this.
we approve it with the alternate PUD zoning. If that passes legal muster.
Okay, are we clear on that, on that decision? Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Leesla seconds. Mrs. Hiller?
I realize we're trying to recreate our routines for planning, but in the past, if it was the first time we'd heard it, if we wanted to do something different, we would remand it back and let the planning commission do that. I would be more comfortable with that simply because that way they could also work on the language, whatever the appropriate language was for screening. So I would propose a substitute motion to remand it back to the planning commission on those same terms, that we'd like them to revisit their original recommendation.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we refer this back to a substitute motion. That would be the motion, that we would refer this back to the planning commission for their work on this process that has been described of making it a PUD.
If you remand it back to the planning commission, there has to be specific tasks that you want them to accomplish. So the motion, as I hear it, would be to consider the PUD instead of the special use permit.
All right,
The-
is that, okay?
As the
that would
maker
be-
of the motion, the PUD instead of the special use permit, and I would like to see screening accomplished both from Silver Lake Road as well as from the train tracks and the industrial district, the industrial park.
Okay, that is all recommending to the planning commission. And they
Correct.
will work on it and we will receive it back at some point. Okay, we have a substitute motion then referring it, and in general, referring it back to the planning commission based on the suggestions that have been made. Mr. Campos?
I just want to add some input here. I've received some calls from people up in North Topeka, specifically off of Furman Road, which is running north and south perpendicular to Lower Silver Lake Road. And that's the concentration of the houses are located on Northwest 18th Street if you're looking at the map. I can understand why North Topeka West NIA voted unanimously against this. I'd implore each of you to take a drive on Crane Street, Crane and Jefferson, which actually starts to turn into Lower Silver Lake Road, and you have the old wheat mill that was there, right across the street from Hills. That's currently owned by the same applicant that we're considering right now, and that rubble has sat there for, 2 or 3 years? So past behavior is a future indicator of future behavior, so I would be more comfortable remanding this back to the planning commission to have them consider R1, because the reality is with R1 zoning, it's really open, and you can do a lot of things and essentially create a de facto junkyard. So I do appreciate the conversation. You guys have taken this very well, so with that.
Okay. Are there other comments, discussion on the substitute motion?
Do we have a
Excuse me,
second?
I1.
Yes, there was a second, and I forgot who it is. Sylvia seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the substitute motion, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. I vote yes.
Ms. Ortiz? I quit. We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the ordinance is referred back to the Planning Commission. Item E, an ordinance on Family Service and Guidance Center.
E is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson, amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at 800 Southwest Lane Avenue from O&I1 Office and Institutional District to MS1 Medical Services District.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fyander will present and answer any questions on this item.
Mr. Fyander.
Thank you. This is a proposal by Family Service and Guidance at property at Southwest 8th and Lane in the Old Town neighborhood. This is the site of the former blood bank, community blood bank, that they are repurposing for a crisis center. In order to do this, they would need medical service zoning instead of office. So with that in mind, this is in keeping with the medical service area of that, of the Old Town neighborhood plan. So it is consistent with that policy of the medical area. Planning Commission staff are recommending approval of the ordinance.
Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Mr. Leesla? Motion to approve. Mr. Schmidt seconds. Any discussion? Mrs. Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What do you mean, you said medical approval? What do you mean by that, Bill?
So the zoning district is the medical service district, so
Right.
it's just restricted to mostly medical uses. In the office district, it's not allowed. A crisis center is like, there is some temporary shelter here as well, so it's not strictly an office use. And so-
Okay, so that's what this is going to be?
So this would allow them to use it for more medical uses, health and medical uses.
Is it for both, health and medical?
Yeah, it would allow them to do their crisis center for short-term temporary shelter for youth, as well as counseling and medical counseling.
Okay. All right, thank you.
As I understand, it's a place also where they place persons who have to be taken out of a home or in a situation
Yes.
on an emergency basis.
Correct.
Right. Okay, is there other discussion? Mr. Manspeaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would it remain on the property tax rolls?
Family Service and Guidance,
No, I don't think so.
I don't think the zoning, I mean, as a property owner, I don't know. I don't know that it would.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think it was on the tax rolls now, as a Topeka Blood Bank was a 501c3. And I'm speaking in general terms, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Manspeaker, we will
Yeah,
We will
we can
check
check
into that
that
and
out.
get-
I have a feeling
prepare
it
that
was
for-
not on the tax rolls. Okay, is there other discussion? And was there a motion?
Yes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. No other discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the ordinance is approved. Proceed to F, applications.
There
I
are
don't
none.
see any. So then this completes our action items for this evening. We proceed to the non-action items. The first is a discussion of the countywide half-cent sales tax. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have been provided in your packet a one-page document, which really provides a very brief summary of activities that have occurred on the half-cent sales tax to date. The second section identifies recommended discussion topics based on the conversations that were generated during the meetings, and then we identify next steps. So just to be very brief. We had 3 official meetings on this. The first was November 4th, 2013, in the Holiday Building. Approximately 75 people attended, and we had 2 meetings very recently on April 17th at the Avondale East. Approximately 40 people attended, and on April 21st at the Topeka Shawnee County Library, and approximately 95 people attended. There was a lot of interaction. Council members led the meeting, and the mayor was actually the MC, and everybody had an opportunity to participate. Basically, 13 people that were there spoke in favor of the Topeka Zoo, 10 supported bikeways and walkability, 10 spoke in support of city street improvements, 9 spoke in support of the Kansas Expo Center, though, and just many of those people were specifically referring to equestrian type of activities. And then there were 3 that talked about supporting economic development, though 7 cited during their comments a need for increased transparency when it came to economic development, how those dollars are spent. 4 additional people recommended a focus on infrastructure improvements within the core of the city of Topeka, and then two people expressed support for parks and recreation types of activities. The specific discussion topics were really 4. Does the city support the extension? And this is my recommendation to you as a discussion opportunity, and the plan is for us to introduce this, sit back, and then take notes, and you all help us formulate a draft resolution, which would come back to you for consideration. So the first question would be, does the city support the extension of the countywide half-cent sales tax? The second question is, when would we prefer that the election ballot be considered by the voters? And the candidates there would be in the August primary, in the November general election, or in the spring 2015. I believe there's an opportunity for a city-wide ballot that also has some county school activities that would be considered also. What should be the length of the tax? There was some discussion about 15 years, 20 years. Councilmember Hiller had suggested 7 years, I believe. So there was a lot of discussion along within this body as to what the length of the tax should be. Then what would the city support from a funding perspective? And they break down into 3 groups. Number 1 is economic development. Number 2 is quality of life activities, and specifically the things that were identified, though there were many more, I was just trying to capture the main points that were made, was the Expo Center, the zoo, biking and walking trails, and the third would be infrastructure, considering streets, bridges, and there's some discussion about other things, and specific, I think there was a chord struck when it came to sidewalks, and that could kind of fall into a quality of life neighborhood thing or infrastructure. So those were the topics that were discussed. The objective today is to allow you all to engage in a conversation, discussion only. We would capture that based on the continuing gathering of notes. We would like to think that within the next couple of days, we could send to each of you a draft resolution for your study and consideration. And when we came back during the next week, you would be able to amend, accept, or reject the resolution, and then the county would be on to doing whatever they need to do in terms of getting this thing on the ballot. So that is my presentation. We are available to answer any questions. I do have Mr. Whitaker available to present information about the recommendation on streets as would be included in the city's portion of the ballot. And any other questions you have, we're available to discuss also. So I end my comments now.
Okay, and I think just also in conjunction with what you're saying, this is a countywide half-cent sales tax. They have asked the city for input as they make the decisions of what goes on the ballot. Is that?
Yes, and one critical element here is that there has to be an interlocal agreement that's signed between the county and the city that we agree as to how the funds are going to be spent. At this point, what we think that we need to provide to the county at this particular point in time is the resolution identifying what we prefer to be on there.
Right, well, on the ballot.
On the ballot.
And actually, on the ballot, it lists the items it's these specific streets, but it has like economic development like that. So there isn't an amount of money in those areas. There, other than, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you, Councilmember Hiller. Our resolution can be whatever we want it to be.
Sure.
It could be a very general statement of, we support these things. It can be, we support these things with the following conditions. We would like to limit spending on this item to this. And there has been a lot of discussion amongst this body, and so we were, the level of specificity of our preferences will be determined based on this conversation.
But my point was, what goes on the ballot is just a listing. There isn't an amount of this amount for economic development, this amount. That occurs in the interlocal agreement.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, that is correct.
So, I mean, again, so, you know, it's, we can get into the specifics, but yet on the ballot, they aren't specifics. We have a listing of streets, but we don't necessarily say how much they will cost to do those street projects. We go down the list till we run out of money or something like that, I think is. So we have before us recommended discussion topics, and if it's the council's agreement, we'll go down those. Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question. That's okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
I've called a lot of things.
I was looking at your name tag. It's gonna fall off in a minute in front of here.
I have had a couple of questions about this tax. It would start being collected in 2016, is that correct? And then if these projects do pass, would some of them start because they would be bonded knowing that it had passed? How does that, I mean, I know we don't collect the money right away, but would the project start right away?
So, Mayor and Councilmember Schwartz, if I can just clarify one point, the current tax is in place until December 31st of 2016. So this tax would not initiate until the beginning of January in 2017.
And as when we would start the projects, I think it would probably be, the answer is, as you say, some could be bonded if they want to do something immediately, or, I mean, and so that's all down the road to be decided by, that could be in the interlocal agreement, or it could be decided by the city and the county at some point, I would think. Mr. Campos?
Thank you, Mr.
And
Mayor.
actually, I think we're having sort of general discussion before we go on to number one, or whatever. Go ahead.
I just had a quick question to city manager. Wouldn't it be possible to also put this on the November 2016 elections?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Campos, absolutely. You could do whatever you wanted. I think the strategy was to go forward if it failed, to fix it and to bring it back. But that really is one of the big discussion points as to when do you go out with this thing.
Okay, thank you,
Right.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anything else? First question, what, does the city support the extension of the countywide half-cent sales tax? Okay, Mrs. Hiller.
I'll kick it off.
Mr. Schwartz.
Um,
Mr. Schmidt.
what we heard, interestingly enough, in all the hearings was that no matter what people's comments or particular thoughts were, everyone was in support, which was interesting to me. So in terms of representing what we've been hearing, and I haven't heard anybody say, I don't think that we shouldn't do it. I mean, it's been remarkably positive in terms of the public response.
Councilman Schmidt.
Well, I've got a series of comments and discussions on this, but I'm wondering if we do have public comment on this, and if we shouldn't let that inform our discussion before we get too much farther into it.
If that's your pleasure, we certainly could have the public comment first, and then we have heard that. All right, seeing general agreement. First person who signed up is Teresa Miller. I don't see Teresa here.
Sent an email saying that she couldn't make it.
I'm sorry?
She emailed saying that she couldn't make it.
Oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't get that email. Second is Joe Ledbetter.
Council members, governing body, mayor, manager. I did not say I was in favor of this extension, and I sent an email to everybody to that effect. I also heard some council members say that they were not going to support something until they saw what was actually proposed, which would be wise. So I did hear at least one other person at one of the meetings say they were flat opposed to an extension at this time. It bothers me that you would want to put something on the ballot so quickly when it's 2.5 years before the money's even collected. I don't really see the sense of that. I see maybe people saying, well, we can reload, we can change it, we still have time to change it a year from now if it doesn't pass. Isn't that deceptive? I mean, seriously, if the public wants it, then why don't we break it out and have it at a point in time that makes a lot of sense, like a November election. It could be 2 years from now, but why must we constantly rush when one group in this town seems to want to push things? And by the way, I didn't even see Go Topeka at the last meeting, which was the library. And since they're handling economic development, I thought that was interesting that they didn't even show up to comment about it. But I want to put into the record a picture, a photo of Fremont Hill. I know this was emailed to a number of people. I hope all of you. There's an extra one. I'm sorry I didn't make a bunch of them. But they were supposed to be emailed. I think you got that from Betty Phillips. We need some infrastructure on the east side if we are going to do this. Fremont Hill is broken. California between 29th and 45th is broken. It really should be 5 lanes. I've talked to people who were involved in the last election. They said we should have done California instead of Croco. Croco was way too far out to do. It should have been California, but California was neglected. It's still a 2-lane road. We have transparency issues, and I thought the survey was interesting because when you take the top 5 items that were talked about by the people, number 5 was the lack of transparency of economic development. And some of the people I did not know, I tell you, I didn't know them. But it is an issue in this community. There are a lot of people fed up with the lack of transparency and accountability with our economic development funds. Even the League of Women Voters said transparency is a concern to them about the economic development funds. And we've tried this thing for 13 years, pretending that that money should not be transparent. I can't find any case law that supports that position. I can't find any public policy in Kansas that supports that position. It's not a good argument. It would fail if it was pressed at a higher level. I know it would. The Attorney General opinions I've got say it clearly would fail to try to pretend that that money should not be transparent. It's $5 million a year, and they've gotten $63 million so far, and we have a huge lack of accountability of where that money went. And so I would like to see some transparency language put in if you're going to include economic development. And in fact, why not have the ballot written so that, and this could be done, it could be done creatively, I'd help. Why not have one question posed that the money not be transparent and strictly go to Topeka?
Your time is up.
I'd like to have an extension.
Motion to extend for 4 minutes.
Is there a second?
I won't use all
Been
that.
moved and seconded to extend for 4 minutes. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 yes. Please continue.
Thank you. Why not have the second question say it will be transparent? And then we take JADO off the hook and they don't have to make a decision, which seems to be appropriate from what I've observed. So why not let the public just make that decision? I already know how they'll vote. They will not vote for something that's not transparent if they have a choice of transparency of public money or not. So I think that would be kind of interesting. And I think you should consider that in your discussion. And that's no slight on anybody. I'm just serious. Let's solve this problem. It's been going on for 13 years. And in the last 4 years, we've lost about a net of 4,000 jobs. Whether you want to pretend it's not happening or not, it is happening, and it's there in your revenue projections and the information that the state puts together about revenue projections. It's there. This city has lost a lot of jobs. So why not fix the transparency issue? Why not make these meetings of Go Topeka Public where the public can go and attend, and we'll all have input, and we'll be able to you know, maybe come up with some really good ideas as to how we could get this city turned around economically. So anyway, I appreciate the extra time, but I won't use all of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. We are on discussion topic 1. Does the city support the extension of the countywide half-cent sales tax? Mrs. Hiller has expressed her view. Is there any others want to express views? Ms. Delisla?
I really enjoyed being at the library. It was wonderful to hear all of the comments. Mr. Ledbetter is correct. There was my fellow council member here, Mr. Manspeaker, and Mr. Ledbetter did not agree with the extension of the sales tax. However, it was refreshing to hear everybody's concept on how the funding should be used. There was a lot of talk about quality of life. There was a lot of talk about growth in our city, and I think that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to utilize those funds, as our constituency has said, and extend the sales tax.
Okay. Mr. Manspeaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, just as a point of clarity, I'm not opposed to the concept of extending the sales tax. My concern is that I can't be supportive of something that if I don't know what it is. So I think it's hopefully important for us on this body to really examine it and try to craft what we are looking for as best as possible. And one thing that obviously came up, you know, a couple of times from the folks that were at the meeting was focusing on the city's core. And I think there's some numbers floating around the city right now that since 1960, our city has grown 65%, but our population has only grown 7%. So a model of that type is not sustainable. If we continue to grow at a rate like that geographically, we won't be successful as a community. And I think as we examine how we spend half-cent sales tax money, focusing on the things that have sort of been left behind, for lack of a better term, and trying to develop the urban core of our city speaks to a lot of the priorities that have been set forth by many of the groups doing good work in our community. I'm just looking for the county and my colleagues to put their money where their mouth is in terms of the investment in the urban core. So, thank you.
So in a sense, you are saying you could support it depending on what's in it, et cetera.
Well, I think that I would like to see equity more than anything else.
Okay.
If you look at the last 10 years of this ballot initiative, there was not equity. There was a county-driven process with county-driven projects and roads that buffered the county in the city, when a great majority of folks were left behind. And one thing that may not be apparent to everyone is that I have no, I have no grievance against folks who live in the county, but the reality is that my city council district is completely surrounded by other city council districts. I don't buffer against the county. So in terms of where we've been left behind and the things that haven't been replaced in my community, I think we are pretty specifically speaking about the urban core of our city. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, and I apologize because I
fine.
passed over her after I said I would recognize her earlier.
No problem, Mr. Mayor. I think, for me, I concur with some of the statements by Councilman Manspeaker. I do think it's real important as to what we end up with on our list of items. But I want to say, it's not that whether or not I support an extension of the sales tax, but I support a ballot initiative that allows people in my district and throughout the city and county to vote. So I support there being the ballot question put to the citizens. So I think that's how we have to focus it. If the county's going to do this, I think the city should participate and include what we want.
but it'll be up to the people whether this passes or doesn't pass. So in that sense, I'm supportive of us working on this so that we can work together with the county. And I had some concerns about whether it be 20 years. I think that sounds like a long time. I think that 10 years was thrown out, and that seems maybe more appropriate, or whatever number we can come up with. So I guess that's the comments. And then I know we haven't really got to the rest of it, but primarily what I hear from people in my district is infrastructure. And that's where I certainly concur that I think we do need to focus on a lot of the older neighborhoods and city streets that have been neglected. So I would concur with that.
Well, and I hear us getting into these other areas. So can we conclude with number one, that generally there is agreement on the extension of the countywide half-cent sales tax, so we can get into the more interesting stuff?
As long as.
As long as, with all these different,
I was just going to
Mr.
throw
Schmidt.
my 2 cents in that I agree with Ms. Everhart that, yes, I do support the idea of putting the countywide half-cent sales tax to a vote, and I support the idea of the citizens of the county being able to decide that.
Mrs. Ortiz?
I too agree with Denise and Nathan to let the constituents vote. But I also want to say that I hope that in having them do so, that we would educate them, because the last time we voted and it has existing, people didn't understand that. People thought, yeah, this is gonna fix, we're gonna get sidewalks, curbs, gutters, da-da-da-da-da, but what they didn't realize is that existing word. So just like coming down 21st Street, and we did all that, and then they couldn't have this, or they couldn't have that, they didn't understand why they didn't pay for that. Plus, when we're doing projects, we can't use that money because of that. And I just think we need to educate them to make sure that they're clear on what they're voting for, because I don't think that they were really, really clear, and they were kind of upset. But I would agree, I hear a lot of my constituents, they wouldn't have a problem with extending it, but the problem that they have is it going to benefit our side of town? Because that existing cut us out of a lot, believe it or not. It really, really did.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Shall we go to question 2, which is, when would we prefer the ballot be considered by the voters? And some have already spoken to this in some form or another. The one item I would add is that there has been discussion of the Expo Center as one of the items, and with that has been associated a rather large number. If that's on the ballot with a large number, that's going to take a lot of the money, and there won't be as much for other areas. That's one reason it was proposed that we go longer than 10 years. I'm not saying that's what we should do, rightly or wrongly, but I think, Mr. City Manager, is that somewhat your thoughts or what you've heard in discussions? We always get, well, and because, in the first ballot, the Topeka Avenue Bridge was included, I think, for 40 million. And that was bonded so that we could do it immediately, quickly. But that took a very large sum of the amount of money that was raised over a period of time, yes.
Mayor, I can tell you that my understanding is that one of the motivations for the longer period of time was to address the having enough funds to do everything, including the Expo Center.
Mhm. Okay. Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Your Honor. The earliest I think we should consider putting this on the ballot would be the spring of 2015, for reasons that I'll get into later. The length of the tax really depends on what projects we want to fund with the revenue. In no event, though, can I support in excess of 15 years. But again, the length of term just depends on what we agree that we want to fund.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And this question is, when do we prefer the election ballot to be considered? For spring of 2015. And of course, in a sense, there is the issue here, I think the county will make this decision. We can provide input into it, but if it was our decision, I think we would want to make that decision when it's on the ballot. But I think it'd be appropriate to express our views when we think what our views are, when it would be best to be on the ballot. Mr. Campos?
I would have to echo what Councilman Harmon just stated. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. City Manager, but it's my understanding that EcoDevo can be an agreement between the city and the county, but infrastructure doesn't necessarily have to be that interlocal agreement. We could do the infrastructure within our core like some of our colleagues have stated. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor and Mr. Campos, let me take a stab at that answer. The interlocal agreement is going to determine how this program works and how the funds are divvied up. In the absence of an interlocal agreement, we would use the county formula to distribute those funds. So I think the answer to your question is yes, but it's probably as far as I can go right now.
Yeah, I think
What I'm trying to get at, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is that we could have an interlocal agreement with the county to do economic development, JADO. But we don't have to have the agreement between our body and the county body for infrastructure. If we wanted to take those monies and solely put it into the city for a comprehensive sidewalk program, comprehensive gutters, sidewalks, expansion of streets such as Tyler and Rochester up into North Topeka, that's something we can do without having the county, going through the county first. It's just something to consider. I would support this only in the contention of it really does address some of our most systemic issues that we have, which is livability and quality of life. Can Hilda walk 5 blocks on a straight sidewalk to get a gallon of milk and butter and then come back home? That's the reality. And the infrastructure issue goes hand in hand with how attractive we are as a community and how attractive we are to large corporations who want to make Topeka their home. If the quality of our life is up to par, we will attract more corporations and our EcoDevo will go that much more forward. But if we have extreme infrastructure issues, basic meat and potato infrastructure issues like sidewalks, and I just took a few visits to some of your districts over the last 2 weeks walking around, specifically on the west, southwest side of the city. You have just as much cracked sidewalks and buckle sidewalks as I do in North Topeka and Oakland. So it really did change my perspective on whether we can do a comprehensive sidewalk program here in the city. You want to make sure that our community members can connect from point A with even sidewalks, and especially those who are in wheelchairs, which happen to be quite a few veterans, which we will receive veterans and hope that we will get the Victory Villages coming in on 21st Street. So when we consider this, let's really have an understanding of the day-to-day nuances that local government can create for people and a positive impact that we can have in people's lives. We can go more than just a pothole and a curb and a gutter. If we can really have a comprehensive approach towards this, I think we can make this go much more forward than we had in prior years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We're looking at question 2, when would we prefer the election ballot be considered by the voters? Is there any other comments on that question? Deputy Mayor? Ms. Hiller was earlier.
I personally don't care when we vote on it, or when the voters would vote on it. I do think that we in the county should keep in mind, to some extent, what Councilwoman Ortiz said, in that if we vote on it even in the spring, it'll still be 2 years before those projects start. And so educating people, I have this sense that people are ready to vote. They're ready to make that future commitment. So in that way, doing it soon makes some sense. But we will need to educate that the time frame for when those projects, whatever they are, rolls out is going to be a while. So related to that, since people were straying into number 3, I really don't think it should be 20 years, and particularly based on when we vote, that we're already 2.5 years from when it starts. I pointed out in the last
I think, why don't we wait with that, and I'll come back to you first. So we stick with the when it occurs on the ballot, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I really was going to pose a question. I thought that potentially a spring ballot was a problem because there's no countywide election, and if it was going to incur an extra cost, I wouldn't want it to be in the spring. That's my only comment. And I don't know if that's true, so I'm kind of posing the question. It seems like I remember hearing that from someone.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I have not talked to the election commissioner. There it is the risk of a municipal election that if there may or may not be some county activity during that time frame.
Yeah, and that election is municipal and school boards.
And school boards.
But there are sometimes no races in some school board districts, so there would not, that's, you get into those types of things. Mr. Schmidt.
On question number 2, I am fine with the August primary. I'm not, I wouldn't be horribly upset if it was something else also. But I like the idea of, one, not incurring extra costs if we're going to have to expand what normally would be a city election to a countywide election. And as several others have noted, getting the information out and letting voters decide on where their money is going to be spent is far easier to do when you're not competing with other major elections at the same time. And so I would be in favor of doing this in August.
And I would add, I've heard that same thing. With the November election, almost all the media time is already bought from the middle of October on. So it shows it's that all going on in November. That's one reason people say August. But again, my view is, I think this is a county decision, and I don't have a strong feeling. I'm sort of, I could go now, or later, but whatever. I think these other things to me are more important, perhaps, than the date. Any other comments? We sort of are, I'm sorry, Mrs. Schwartz.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think August might be a little too soon to get the word out and to really decide what we're going to spend all this money on. From the meeting that I attended, I saw that we collected $44 million in the 10 years for economic development, $40 million for infrastructure. And I've had a lot of questions as to, where that money has gone. So I would think that we would want to really determine, and I know it's up to the county to do this, what is going to be on the ballot. I also think November might be a better time because of voter turnout. You have much better turnout when you have elections that are major statewide elections. So even though maybe the marketing, the message may not, it's going to compete with everything else out there in November, but your turnout, the voter turnout is much better. Much better in November than it is in the spring and when it is in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2, going, City Manager, you have a general view of yeah, I think it's a little mix there. Number 3, the length of the tax. Mrs. Hiller.
Well, as I said in I think the 3rd hearing, I simply did the math on, we can think back to the Boulevard Bridge, but to the various projects that people had discussed, including the Expo Center. I went back to our recent votes on our capital improvement projects where the markup to bond the items, no matter what they cost, was 63%. And what that would mean is that if we chose to recommend that the items proposed would be done in cash, and we know how to do that with the staging of our street projects that we have now, we would be able to do the same number of items in 12 years with cash as it would take 20 years if we bonded them. And that's deducting out $5 million a year for economic development, just like we've done before. That's a huge savings to me. So in terms of the time period, I think to do all the things that I've heard of, a reasonable package that I've heard of, 12 years, it might take 12 years to do them all with cash. I don't think we want to go longer. Councilman Manspeaker's made some very good points as we've come to the end of this current 12-year run. of that being pretty much of a stretch, and I think we've all observed that. So I think it should not be any longer than 12 years, but I could live with that.
Okay. And I think the Topeka Boulevard Bridge was bonded to be done immediately because there was concrete falling off of it, and it was a hazard, and so we bonded that. I don't think anything else was bonded in this.
I'm not sure. I took
I-
these as
yeah.
if, because many of them would be in our CIP otherwise, some of the things
Yeah.
that have been discussed, and we would have bonded them as a city if we'd done them through the CIP. So I simply looked at that, whether they were the big items or the composites of, and I've
Yeah.
I put together a list of suggestions based on what I've heard, and I'll pass that around when
Okay.
it's appropriate, but
Yeah.
$80 million savings is a lot of money to either save or spend on other things.
But I would say, again, we didn't bond any the last time, except for the Topeka Boulevard. And I don't see bonding, again, and that would be an interlocal agreement also, if we would. So we would have a
Correct.
say, we would have half the say to determine whether we bond or go by cash.
Using the Boulevard Bridge as an example, if your 40 million is the correct number, and
I
I'm gonna
don't-
assume that it
I don't
is.
wanna verify, yeah.
If,
you know.
assuming that it is, we spent 40 million on the bridge, and we spent 25 million additionally to bond it. And
Mhm.
again, that's a lot of money.
Except we had concrete, it was falling down.
Understand.
And so, I mean, that's where I think the body comes together. Okay, let's move on. We're talking about what should be the length of the tax. Mr. Campos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think 15 years is a, 12 to 15 is actually good to shoot for. I would also entertain perhaps sunset in that tax, so it's incrementally going down the closer we get to that expiration date. But in regards to Councilwoman Hiller, goes back to quality of life, Mr. Mayor. We're about to bond a $29 million piece of equipment for the ozone for our public works. If we can pay for quality of life issues and infrastructure issues, which does include our water infrastructure, that's something to be considered. I think going outside of the box, and especially saving money that we're not going to be paying in interest, so we can pay it forward for any type of infrastructure, have it be sidewalks, piping. We need to be laying 8 miles of water main a year, which is roughly $8 to $10 million a year, depending on what the cost of sweet oil is going on for that year. So as we move forward with this, and especially in regards to what specifically we're shooting for and the time period, I think we should be extremely creative.
Other views on the length of the tax? Mr. Manspeaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would much rather see this as a 10-year tax. And, you know, one thing that I think we need to take into account is that this is maybe the best of, what's the word? Well, I can't remember how Churchill put it, something about capitalism being the best system when you compare it with all the others, except it's the most evil, like everything else.
Or
So
something like
a regressive tax taxes the poor disproportionately within our community. A sales tax is a regressive tax. So to set a tax on our community, and specifically on the poorest amongst us, for 20 years seems a little aggressive and over the top. I would like to see us start to look at how we redistribute our taxing system in the city of Topeka, and specifically see projects and road maintenance and things like that come under the guise of our general fund rather than sales tax extensions and projects and things of that nature. Only because they do have a dramatic impact on folks who struggle to meet basic needs within our community. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more discussion on this item, we'll go to number 4. We're all ready for this. What would we support for funding? We've heard many comments already on we have A, economic development, B, quality of life, Expo Center, zoo, biking, walking trails, C, infrastructure, streets, bridges, others, whatever, sidewalks, whatever might be involved there.